All right, DIY community members, welcome back to the 100K call series part 2 here, where we're going to cover premium data, one of my favorite topics to cover. Why? Well, if you plan on doing outbound sales, right? If you're planning on doing cold call marketing, SMS marketing, and even direct mail marketing, data is ultimately what creates deal opportunities for your business. It doesn't necessarily close deal opportunities, right? That's your talent. Those are your acquisitions team members and your dispositions team members. But ultimately, data and the lists that we build for these types of campaigns ultimately create and bring the right opportunities in front of our lead specialists, acquisition managers, team, etc., so that our business can have the right opportunities in front of us. So it's really important. This might be the most important video you watch as you start 2025 if you plan on doing these types of marketing methods. So let's jump right in. So before we get started on agenda, right, I want to make this clear. Data is expensive if you aren't already aware. Data isn't perfect, and data is always changing. But ultimately, as I mentioned, data is what creates deal opportunities. So it's a necessary evil in our marketing. We need to have a clear plan for when we build lists and partner with skip trace providers, depending on the types of opportunities we're looking to source for our real estate business in 2025. So a lot to cover. We're going to get into the 100K call system hierarchy. I'm going to break down the data process in a couple simple steps, talk about how we go and automate your data department with personnel and tools. And then ultimately at the end, we want to build a data budget for you to think about as we go into the new year. So when we look at the system, the 100K call system, hierarchy, right? We talked about this in the introductory video, which is the 3 components that make up our 100K call system. Starts with premium data, goes to best-in-class software, and wraps up with A+ player talent. But today, as I mentioned, we're going to focus on premium data. And when you're building a budget and thinking about where to allocate your finances towards your campaigns every single month, if, again, cold calling is going to be the method you choose, this is sort of how our structure is at the moment, at least how we started out. So our data budget takes up about 30 to 35% roughly. Our personnel is the most expensive piece. And then our systems, although expensive, definitely the third on the totem pole here. My recommendation, especially if you plan on doing cold call marketing in the new year, is that you have a clear plan and investment and allocated budget set for your data. And this really should be the last thing that you cut. Why? Because this data is going to separate you from all the flooded competition, the come and go wholesalers, the ones that aren't taking this attention to detail in their marketing efforts. And you really need to make sure you're hitting a home run at this stage of the process. So think about where you're currently allocating budget towards, make that investment in a good skip trace provider and in a good list provider. And we're going to give you guys a couple options here on this meeting. So to progress further, let's break down the data process. So first, we're going to go over the resources you have and how we go about targeting our hottest markets and zip codes. Then we're going to go over some different list pulling and skip tracing providers and recommendations and best practices. And then we'll wrap up with list cleanup. So first off, you have access to this resource here, which is in the acquisition section of, I'll go in, and you go to choosing your target market, and you're going to see 2 resources. One is the market research template. We've already gone over this in a previous module, so I'm not going to go deep into it, but we use these data points. This is the exact sheet I used when I honed in on my market of Indianapolis back in 2023. And so I put a couple examples here for you guys to go off of. There's a separate video. Again, watch that video and it breaks down exactly how to use this form. But we're going to use this first, and then we're going to drill into, once we've found the right state you want to market into, we're going to ultimately want to drill down into county and maybe even specifically zip code on population growth trends and ultimately median and home price trends in those zip codes in those counties as well. So what I've provided to you all is statewide data so that you can focus on your target state, and then you can go into figuring out which counties, cities, or metro markets or zip codes you're going to go after. So those are accessible. Make sure that you reach out to us or in the support group if you don't have access to these resources. So step one is we look for these metrics, markets that have as close to a million in population as possible, median home prices sub 350K. Now I'm even going as far as below 300K. And then also looking just at the volume of homes sold last month and figuring out which markets have homes that are moving quickly, right? Median days on market being sub 50 days. So obviously that's how we ended up finding Indianapolis. We looked at all these key metrics, and this is what showed a healthy market when we did this over a year ago. All right. So these are some resources we start with. So step one, we want to figure out where are we going to go out and market, right? What are the hottest zip markets and zip codes? You're going to go out and research based on those data points are provided to you in those resources. And then I would say probably pick maybe 10 to 15 that look really good, states that look good to you, and then narrow those down to your top three, and then go even further. And of course, pick your top market. All right. So jumping back in, as I mentioned, there's a longer video that goes over specifically how we go about finding the hottest zip codes and markets with those resources I just shared. But for today's discussion, we're not going to focus on that. What I really want to get deeper into now is best practices. So first off, when you build your lists, it needs to be off of either distressed or motivated seller data points. That's ultimately going to get us to acquire properties at a discount, right? We want to talk to people that are going to be highly motivated and open to selling their property at a discount to begin with. So there's a difference between these two types of lists. There's distressed seller lists. These are properties or people that are in a state of distress. So if the seller is in a state of distress financially, or the property is in a state of distress, things like fire damage or just vacant, going through pre-foreclosure, etc. Then there's motivated seller lists. These are more people that are certainly motivated, and based on these data points here, we feel that they would be looking to sell their property when we engage with them, but it doesn't necessarily mean they need to sell their property at a discount. And of course, some of these on both ends are going to be more motivated than others. And you, of course, can make the case for divorce, etc., even probate, inheritance. But at the end of the day, I've been engaged in situations where with divorce sellers or probate, pre-probate and inheritance, and there's absolutely no mean reason they would need to sell at a discount, more so on the divorce side than anything. But you understand where I'm going with this, right? We want to make sure that when we build our lists, it's either distressed or motivated seller data points. I always start with distressed first. I build my data pool off of all the distressed properties that I have in my target market. Every single month, I refresh those lists in my target market to see which new properties pop up. And then if I need to backfill more data in order to get my necessary data that I need per month to get the leads that I need per month. And at this point in time, we're doing anywhere between 20 to 30,000 properties a month that we're targeting in cold calling, mixed in with our SMS efforts. So, figure out basically what is the entire data pool that you need to target per month based on how many callers you have, based on how many leads you're looking to source. Like that's the math to it. So if you're looking for a few list options, I wanted to provide some free options for those that are just looking to take action. You may not have your budget established yet, and that's quite okay. I don't want you to see this video and just to deter you from getting started and thinking, oh, I need a bunch of money before I can even start taking action. No, I started off with a very low budget, and I was able to take action too and still close deals. It's just going to take you longer, right? So my goals for this community and for the information I'm always sharing is what can I do to make this easier for you guys and expedite your path to success. But sometimes that's going to require an investment, right? So first off, these are some free great options on the right hand or the left hand side. Now here are what I'm going to actually focus on for now, because I go over some of these free options in another video in the data section. So the paid options, here's what I'm seeing as the future of list providers, right? You have your standard ones, as I like to call them, your PropStream, your list source, the ones that have been tried and true and have been used for a long time, batch leads, still great products and still have their utility. And I use them in my marketing every single month, but naturally they're super saturated. And a lot of people, like the newer wholesalers and those that are just getting started, of course, that's the lower barrier to entry. So I'm encouraging everyone, if you can afford it and you can start planning for this, is start to look into predictive list providers. What are predictive list providers? Well, these are list providers that are using AI and different analytics really just juiced up analytics and AI to help provide highly motivated sellers and properties. And that's ultimately going to come with a premium cost. So what are a couple of these options, right? There's a few on here that I listed. I use Lead Sonar. I also have used DataFlick in the past, but you can see when you start getting into the realm of these predictive list companies, right? This is no longer, playing in the prop stream game, $97 a month, batch leads, $99 a month. Like, you got to pay a premium for this. Okay. And it's more like county based, the way they segment this. And now it's no longer just like all of the entire country, right? You're not just going to get AI data for the entire US. You have to start buying based on metro area. And that's really good because it's going to help keep less saturation, right? Only a select few of clients can afford this, or the market, I should say, can afford this. Thus, there's going to be less people being, targeting the same data. So this is where I'm putting a lot of my budget in the new year is looking into predictive data platforms. Dantic being one that we got recommended. This is a beast of a platform. I don't know the pricing structure, but I think it's very similar to what you would see here with DataFlick. But these are some options, guys and girls. I would look into, making that investment into predictive, still leveraging, the prop streams. Of course, ListSource is more up to date than I would say PropStream as far as their data goes. I use Reonomy for everything that I need in the commercial space, which is an expensive platform. So, just start to think about, again, what types of property are you looking to source? What's your business model? Right? If you're looking for discounted residential, if you're looking for discounted flips, discounted, small residential multifamily, go for predictive dialers. If you're looking for large commercial deals, large commercial assets, look into things like Reonomy. And these are going to be really the reasons why those survive or fall in the new year, in my opinion, if in the cold call marketing and SMS marketing space. So what are some final list building best practices as we wrap up on the list building topic? Always avoid targeting properties that have been purchased in the last 3 years unless they are on the distressed list. So what I mean by that is, if you're going to be targeting equity-based lists or more motivated seller lists on the ones I provided, obviously there's some ones we don't include in this, like divorce, probate, inheritance, etc. Right? That doesn't matter about the, how many years the sellers own the property. But if you're going to be going after like senior owners, high equity, absentee owners, etc., high equity lists, is you want to make sure that the property has not been purchased in the last 3 years. That goes without saying. If you're going to go after any debt-related lists, right, things like tax delinquents, make sure that that amount of debt is greater than $2,000. I've found that anything lower, these people are just not motivated enough to sell. Maybe in some markets, $1,000, $1,500, that could definitely be a lot of money. But I think in the majority of markets in the greater US, $2,000 even is probably not enough to get people to want to sell their home. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to do any debt related lists, just look into the volume. Then no matter what type of list you're looking after, if you're looking for, of course, off market discounted deals like most investors and wholesalers are, make sure you put no on for on market. You don't want to target anything that's on market in these list building providers or list building tools, I should say. If you are looking to maximize your skip tracing hits and get the most of your skip tracing budget, which is what I'm trying to recommend for everyone, make sure that you hit individual owner type only. Why? Because most skip trace providers cannot get LLC, or the owner information for LLCs or corporate owned assets. So do yourself a favor and just in the beginning stages, only do individual owners, because that's the people you want to engage with. Now, as you start getting more savvy in your sales, as you start to get more familiar, you start to build a more premium budget for skip tracing, then you can go partner with companies like Skip Matrix or Skip Better, because they do provide the ability to pull LLC and corp owned information. They still have their challenges with hit rates like any other group, but they definitely are a lot better than others and separate themselves from the competition because they can do LLCs and corps. And again, that's skipmatrix.com or Skip Better. And then lastly, this is getting into some data 2.0, is stacking your lists. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail at the end. But we want to start stacking once we've been building enough lists in our target market. Now we want to start layering that data on top of one another and seeing properties that are falling on multiple lists. Why? Because if properties are hitting multiple distressed or motivated seller data points, we now know that this is a highly motivated and targeted lead that we need to get a yes or no from as soon as possible. So that's where you get into the benefit of list stacking and really maximizing your data. And when you start doing marketing for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, etc., and have enough data pool to go after. All right. So now let's get into skip tracing lists. All right. Here's a couple providers that we've used in the past. Right. We've got some paid options and we've got some free or low cost options. My biggest thing here with skip tracing is you're going to get what you pay for. But again, I don't want to ever let money get in the way of people getting started on the wholesaling journey. I think it's always good to get in the game than sit on the sidelines. But at the end of the day, as I've mentioned, building that budget, investing in the data up front is going to expedite getting the right leads into your pipeline. So I've talked about a couple of these options already. These are the ones that I would recommend. If you guys have any questions or want us to facilitate the skip tracing or list building process for you, just reach out to our team and our data team can definitely help. Obviously provide a service for that. So, or if you just have questions, drop them in the support group. If you're wondering, hey, I'm not sure which one to choose, what makes the most sense, we're happy to provide more guidance on it. But we wanted to provide at least a few options so people could understand, based on their budget, what makes the most sense for them to go after. In my experience, anything that's 8 cents or above, Quality Skip is one that I've started to use a lot more, and I would recommend them. They're the only ones that I would go below 8 or 10 cents. But when I start dipping below that, I tend to find the quality takes a massive hit. And what do you know about my style or what my take is on this? If we're going to spend money on the talent and we're going to spend money on our dialer seat and go through the exercise of spending time calling people, we might as well get in touch. We might as well get in touch with the right ones. So you guys have heard me talk about that a lot. So let's think about, as we finalize some skip tracing best practices, you want to build your target list, step one, but make sure, of course, if you're going to be taking the time, as I just mentioned, to build that targeted list and to make that investment in filtering down to the right people, naturally we want to make sure we partner with the right skip trace provider that's actually going to get us the correct contact information for these homeowners. So that if you skip that step and you decide to say, well, I'm going to really build this kick-ass targeted list in my market that I know if I get in touch with these sellers, they're going to be looking to sell their property at a discount. And then you go use a Fiverr skip trace provider, or you go use a 2 cent, 3 cent, whatever cent skip trace provider that is lower tier, you're going to get poor results. So at the end of the day, team, remember this. Again, don't let these two things be the reason why you don't get started. But if you're going to start budgeting, really start to set aside that data budget. Now, we want to start finalizing, as we wrap up with a couple slides here, getting your budget and getting your plan built, right? So we're going to talk about the differences between spray and sniper approach marketing. But I want to level set that regardless of what style of marketing you do, I highly recommend day one of you doing marketing that you, if nothing else from this presentation, take this slide with you, because I made this mistake in the beginning stages. I was skip tracing the same records over and over again. I was wasting money on my skip tracing, and I also wasn't treating my data with respect, as I like to say, because I wasn't looking into my data. I wasn't finding leads that were falling on multiple lists. I wasn't building a cadence or a follow-up campaign for leads that we already engaged with in the past, not interested leads or nurtured leads, etc. I was just focusing on engaging with my qualified leads and not hitting my DNCs or FDNCs. So at the very beginning stages, day one, you need to track and tag, meaning you need to make sure that when you pull your reports from your marketing, that these records are up to date on what occurred on that call. That's called a disposition. So when you are doing marketing, your dispositions are basically what the result of the call was. So a couple examples as I show you a client report here is not interested. Another example of our disposition could be answering machine. Another one could just be uninterested lead. right? Or do not call. We have some that are dispositions that are custom, like anytime we speak with a Spanish speaker, we make sure we tag that so a member of our Spanish speaking side of our business can have that conversation. If they're interested in creative or seller financing or listing opportunity and they want to list their property, we tag a disposition with they want to list it, they're going to look into list. That's just some custom stuff that we've built to better work with our clients, but I think you guys understand my point. By tagging and understanding what happened with these leads, now you can look in and simply understand, okay, this campaign is right now performing incredibly, right? It's got a 3.7 lead conversion rate. This one has a 2.8%. So both are performing really well, but you want to ultimately see why they're performing well. And in contrast too, on the other side, when campaigns are underperforming, we want to get into that data and we want to look at these metrics, these dispositions, because that's going to tell us ultimately the quality of our list that we built, how motivated or stressed were these sellers actually once we went and reached out to them. And it's also going to dictate the quality of your skip trace and list providers. So this data is super important to track because now you can start understanding, hey, was this a really good provider for our list or skip tracing? Yes, let's keep working with them. No, let's think about experimenting with another group. Because a lot of this team is going to be experimenting, unfortunately. I can give you a lot of what's worked for me in my market with other clients. I can give you all of that information as best I can to help guide us. But until you really start marketing in your market, you're always going to start figuring out what's going to work better for you and your team. So just start looking though at the data from the very beginning stages, contact attempts, of course, and understanding the history of that record is super key. Apologies, let me just zoom back in. And then, of course, once we've been pulling lists for so long, as I talked about, you can start recycling that data in creative ways, right? In the very beginning stages, you're going to have to spend a lot of money in skip tracing to have enough leads and enough of a data pool to start going after. But naturally, once you've been marketing so long in any given market, now we can, instead of having to skip trace new data all the time, maybe start to lower that data budget a little bit, and we can actually start going back into our old data that we paid for and finding new ways to retarget that data for people that we haven't spoke to, that is. Okay, so these are some best practices when we think about list cleanup and list management. Please make sure these do not go over your head, and please make sure that they get implemented into your business from the day you start marketing. Now, we've talked about stacking data a little bit and more of the concept, but just to finalize some key points, the goal is to make sure that when you have been marketing for a long time and you have enough data, you feel that you can start stacking your lists, as we call it. The goal is to start finding leads that fall on multiple lists and are highly motivated because they're hitting multiple data points of distress or motivation. And so that's the number one focus and goal of doing list stacking. Now, another benefit of this, however, and this is what I've started doing as I thought, okay, what can I do if I'm going to do cold call and SMS marketing? I'm going to continue to keep investing into that marketing channel. What can I do to separate myself from my competitors? Well, one thing we started to do this year was stacking data providers on top of one another. So cross-referencing PropWire and PropStream to see which properties were falling in their market. And we found that some platforms had new properties versus the other, right? Then we started to stack Lead Sonar as a list provider, which is a predictive AI platform. So we were finding properties that were falling on that platform, but not in PropStream, right? So you see where I'm going with this. And now what that does is it allows us to uncover new properties in our target market that may not be on other platforms. So as I mentioned at the beginning stages, data is imperfect. These platforms are imperfect. They're never going to be 100% accurate. So just don't trust them that they're going to always have all of the properties in your target market, or at least the data points of distress or motivation in every single market. So now what we can do, and the cause and effect is it ultimately can reduce your data budget, as I've talked about, once you've been marketing for a few months, and some tools that you can look into. We started out with REI Business, great company. Really love what they do over there, and I highly recommend looking into that product for list stacking. I know that RE Simply does have the ability to do list stacking, I believe, in their CRM, and then you can just do it the old-fashioned way, which is what we've been able to do now with a coder and data analysts with Google Sheets and Excel to save money on list stacking software. So how do we ultimately automate? Right, as we wrap up, now the goal is, okay, we've gone through some ideas, getting some resources available now for skip tracing options and list building options for your data team. Now let's talk about automating it. And the good news is this is the easiest department to automate. Right? This, you're going to see in a moment, we went from 20 plus data managers in 2022 down to 3. And still to this day, we have 4 total people in our data management department with all the clients that we have doing probably 300,000, 400,000 at any given time, records per month, being able to facilitate this and not burn themselves out. So let's take a step back, and in order for us to automate our data department, I want you to understand what actually needs to be done in just the base level tasks that need to be done by any data department to be successful. And so, of course, the tasks of list pulling, list cleanup, prep, these are things like scrubbing for FDNC and DNC, removing old leads, right? Just getting your list ready and cleaned up before they go to the skip trace provider, once they get onto your campaigns, once they are removed from the campaigns and decommissioned, right? There's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done. So that's a major time suck. Then, of course, sending the list to the skip trace providers. Please make sure before you do that, as best practice, always scrub your data and clean your list before sending to your skip trace provider. Why? Because you're just going to be burning money. As I talked about in the last 2 slides, I did not scrub my lists. I was just skip tracing new list after new list and just didn't realize, hey, I'm actually pulling the same properties in my market and I'm wasting a lot of money. I quickly learned the game of scrubbing and taking careful attention to detail to my list. And so that's what I want you all to do is before you send a new list to a skip trace provider, scrub that with your old records, remove all the leads that have already been skipped, remove, of course, the people you've already been engaged with for opportunities or deeper disposition, then go send that to your skip trace provider because you'll maximize your money. And then once you've gotten that taken care of, you simply need to be uploading these into whatever lead generation software that you're using. And that does take some time, right? There's formatting, you got to upload that, make sure that they're assigned to the right agents. And there's a lot of like logistical things that need to go on. That does take time. So you need to make sure that that task is included. And then once the campaign is complete, then these records are being updated. A software can do that, as I'll show you in a second. And then number one thing is that you have a report of some kind that's a dashboard so that you can review your KPIs on a daily basis. So as I mentioned, we went from 20 data managers to 3 not so long ago. And so this is the current structure that we have. These are the roles and responsibilities. So we have 2 data specialists where their roles are doing the list cleanup and prep. Then they're doing list tagging and then report updating. And they're actually using a lot of these tools that are just communicating with one another, leveraging those products and that are talking nicely to one another and being able to just say, hey, they're just, facilitating more of the back end stuff. They're not burning themselves out at all. And that's the power of software. And so then on top of, I would say their manager or their compadre is Riz, the data whiz. He's the manager and he actually does the list building. So the reason why he does the list building and that these 2 do not do the list building is that we have to be very careful in our line of business because every single client has a different business model that we work with. And so we need to make sure that every filter that we do to generate the right deals for their business, if one of those are off, it could ultimately negatively impact the campaign. So we have someone who's a more tenured data analyst and data specialist that understands when they're pulling lists and applying filters, what the cause and why does that make that lead motivated now? So that's really important that your data team understands when you build a list, they understand why and what the result of that list can be for the client or in your case, your business. And then lastly is our technical operations manager, Rafiq. He actually started as a data specialist and now runs our technical operations team. And he's just making sure he's there for quality assurance, reviewing reports. And as long as the client campaigns are being delivered on time and there's no delays in service delivery, he's doing his job right, and then constantly looking into new innovations, right? New ways of doing things, helping Riz with creating new colorful dashboards and reporting for the entire business, not just our clients. And so there's a lot of ways that you guys can start to grow and innovate your data department. But for right now, just make sure that these key tasks are taken care of. One part-time data manager can do that, obviously depending on the volume size campaigns you're doing. But don't go crazy just yet, like I did. And these are the core tools that we use. I'm sure there's other software and things that we've, some minor things that we are subscribed to or using AI in a lot of ways now. But overall, these are the core products, right? Google Sheets for list management, list cleanup. We have Google Studios for our KPI dashboard. So our Google Sheets actually integrate into Google Studios, and what connects all that is Zapier. So very, very easy and simple breakdown. This helps facilitate a very large operation. So as we wrap up, to build our budget on the last two slides, let's think about the two approaches you can take when it comes to outbound sales. There's the sniper approach, and then there's the spray approach. Okay, I tend to do the spray approach, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, but I've now started to also mix in doing a sniper approach when it comes to highly targeted and sensitive data that we even made a large investment into, right? So let's talk about the spray approach first. So this is those that think, more it's a numbers game, and that's the approach I take, as many of you know. It's more expensive, but in my opinion, it's a faster route to ROI because you have more control over your deal pipeline. You have a much larger data pool that you're going after. The focus is on abundance of volume of opportunities to ultimately qualify the right deals and leads to work on and focus your time and energy on. The ones that are truly motivated, right? So being able to just get in my market, get to a yes or no with these people, qualify, make an engagement with them, nurture them now with lead managers. Like that's just my preference. But I know folks that have done really well in this business. And I even had a client who did a deal that she just went on PropStream. She skip traced it on her own, and she happened to call this person, and lo and behold, they answered, and then she turned it into a $30,000 assignment fee. So it works, but what you run the risk of is that patience is super key. Scalability for this method of marketing can be challenging because you really got to hone in on going one after the other on these leads and really making sure that you're hitting them for multi-channel marketing. And you're also just trying to make sure that you make the most of that small data pool, right? So when you have a very targeted data pool of highly distressed and motivated seller leads, that can just sometimes, although highly targeted, and you like to think that one of those opportunities are going to come, result into a deal. Ultimately, if you take that now, you could go a month, make 500 calls and not, get an opportunity, right? So just keep in mind, if you're going to go the sniper approach, that's where I would highly suggest you're doing multi-channel marketing, right? You're hitting them with an SMS, you're hitting them with a call, maybe even a direct mail letter, and you're spending more of your budget on the data and the list. And you could even go to the county and take time scraping that as well. And then so you just know, hey, I got a 500, maybe to 750 people that are super, super high, motivated and targeted. I'm just going to spend the next 3 months going after these folks until they say yes or no. And that's another way of going about it. So think about which one makes the most sense, because one's going to be more expensive than the other typically. Especially if you're going to do a spray, it's a lot more to maintain for the long term. It's just a lot more budget you have to allocate for if you want to do this the right way. And so look at some rough prices when we just think about the data side. And this has nothing to do with the cost of your caller, the cost of your dialer, right? This is just a rough idea of budget that you need to set aside for your data department on just the simplest level. So I was doing 10,000 records for this. Why did I choose 10,000 records? I find, and this is what we do in our services, that one caller minimum per month needs to target at least 10,000 properties to get enough volume of leads to close a deal, in my experience, regardless of the market you're doing business in. Some of them it's higher than others. So just know that I got this budget range from doing 10,000 records, because I always want to just start with what does good look like in this current market and give you guys a transparent understanding of what it's going to cost to get there. So looking at first, think about if you're going to choose sniper versus spray approach, you have to ask yourself, okay, how many cold leads do I need to speak to then ultimately qualify? So how many qualified leads do I have to convert out of my data pool to ultimately get that one closed deal? And so you got to reverse engineer this math And for those that don't have it yet, you're going to get that by just starting your marketing. So just take action. Start speaking to sellers, start qualifying leads, and get that first deal closed, and then reverse engineer. Okay, now I know this is what I need to do. This is how many sellers I need to speak to, and that will ultimately determine, do you take the sniper approach or the spray approach for your marketing based on what worked best. So you can test it out and see. Then you, of course, want to pick, your list building and data tool. It can range, but, PropStream 97, Lead Sonar 97, Batch Leads 97, 99, so on and so forth. Those are your options on a lower budget. So then you got to look into your skip trace providers, as I talked about, anywhere between 3 to 15 cents. Then you have your talent, of course, if you want to do this. If you don't want to be doing this part of the business, which I certainly recommend, first thing, remove yourself from lead generation. Second, remove yourself from data management. And if you do want to remove yourself, you're looking at, a data person can be anywhere between, I would actually say this could be on the lower end, like 250. I get mine in Egypt. Sometimes from data as well, I get them from the Philippines. So it can be cheaper in the Philippines than it is in Egypt. So I can range anywhere from like $2 to $3, depending on where you're getting the virtual talent in the globe. So all that to say, rough ranges. Wanted to make sure you guys went into the new year with a good idea of, hey, I want to get active in cold call and SMS or direct mail marketing. Great. What it's going to need from a data side to get results to close deals. This is what it's going to take, team. Please reach out to us if you have any questions in the support channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys on part 3, where we're going to cover best in breed software to set your team up for success on the 100K call system series. We'll see you guys in the weekly trainings.